Hey everyone, welcome to Remap. My name is Jared, and today we're going to be taking a look at MiHoYo's cash cow, Genshin Impact. And before we jump into our review, I'd like to take a moment to provide a little backstory, just to explain what the game is, because I know not everyone is familiar with it. Genshin Impact is an open-world action RPG with an anime art style. But the most famous element of the game, and one that we're going to dive into later, is that it's a free-to-play gacha game. And gacha mechanics are pretty similar to loot boxes, where you spend real or virtual currency on a random in-game item. But this is the only monetization for Genshin Impact, pretty much. And if this kind of sounds like gambling, potentially spending real money for random items, you'd be right, but I'll touch on this later. I just wanted to give a little overview of the game if you are unaware. But with all that being said, I will be keeping this spoiler-free in terms of the story, and as always, these are my opinions and mine alone. Now, starting off with the visuals, as we usually do, Genshin Impact boasts a sharp rendition of the anime art style. The distinct colors of characters and the environment make the game enjoyable to look at. Obviously they're not doing anything revolutionary with the graphics, but there's more than enough variety visually to keep me from being bored. Different regions have distinct color palettes, and the skyboxes and backgrounds in certain areas are legitimately gorgeous. Now, what certainly helped this was that I was playing the PS5 version of Genshin Impact. I don't think I need to explain that the mobile version won't look as good. This is a game you can play on PC, PlayStation, and even mobile. I don't know how the heck they got it running on mobile, but be advised, if you're playing this thing on mobile, it is not going to look as good. But what helped Genshin Impact stand out visually, more so than the graphics, was some great character designs. The characters are by far the highlight of this game. And for those unaware, the core gameplay of Genshin Impact is switching between your party of 4 different characters for traversal and combat. And this makes the characters center stage of your experience, because different people will run completely different parties of characters. And luckily, MiHoYo, the developer, took time to make the 49 and counting, it's about to be 50 next week or in a couple weeks, characters unique. Even beyond the gameplay mechanics, each character has a unique visual style and voice actor to create a personality that stands out from other characters. They give you enough backstory of each character that's not just, person 24 just showed up. No. This is their story. This is where they're from. Develop the character in some way before and as you're playing as them, which is nice to see. And Genshin Impact is very much a game that the cool factor of a character has a hand in their popularity. This is a game you play where you look at some characters, you're like, that person looks really cool, and then you find out, they're one of the more popular characters. It's one of this style of game. But the gameplay is really where these differences shine, as you would expect. Some characters are using an electro bow to zap enemies. Others are freezing everything in front of them with their sword. And my personal favorite, literally calls in a meteor to nuke the map as his burst ability. And you're probably saying to yourself, okay, out of 50 characters, people are probably only using 5 or 10, so where's the real variety here? And here we've arrived with the gacha mechanic. And this right here is how Genshin Impact grossed $2 billion its first year, and also why dozens of the characters are getting regular use. Because besides a handful of free characters the game gives you to start out, the only way to get new ones is with wishes. And a wish, it's very simple. It's a random weapon or character. And to get wishes, you can spend in-game currency you earn, or, here's the big one, by paying real money. And you're probably saying to yourself, if you can earn these wishes, just play the game for them. And as great as that sounds, the hours of gameplay to wishes ratio is not very good, and not to mention the odds for these top characters or weapons, which are known as 5 stars, is insanely low. I have played over 130 hours and spent $50 on Genshin Impact. And I have a total of 4 5-stars. Okay? If I hadn't spent any money, I'd be lucky to be at 2. Alright? You put in hours and hours and hours, and you'll be incredibly lucky if you get even 1 5-star. But this mechanic does allow this game to be free to play, and it's been getting regular content updates every month for the past 2 years, and they have years of content waiting to be added. So it's clear the money is going towards something. But at the end of the day, this gacha mechanic is so close to gambling that I'd treat it as such. This is just my opinion, but make sure your younger sibling or kid doesn't have your credit card logged into their account, because this is the kind of game you can blow through $1,000 in like 5 or 10 minutes. It's scary. So you got to set yourself limits with this. But going back to the game itself, the story and the world has some surprisingly great depth to it. You're on a journey to find your family in a new world where you meet allies and enemies along the way, along with learning more about the world you're in, the locations, the lore. And the main story quests can take you to these large towns, large mountains, and while taking detours, allows you to find new rewards and secrets to discover, because this large open world facilitates this entire journey very well. It's your traditional open world. You've got your little side stuff you can go explore, you've got your main quests, and I wasn't expecting a world this huge in a free-to-play game. But Genshin Impact's open world format is clearly inspired by The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you're thinking of, okay, what will this map remind me of? Will it remind me of a GTA map, a Skyrim map? It literally, I think they hit Control-C, Control-V on a big chunk of Breath of the Wild mechanics, because, there's similar mini dungeons, puzzles, collectibles to increase your stamina. A lot of Genshin Impact is clearly lifted from Breath of the Wild. But things don't have to be original to be enjoyable. Sometimes the copycats, while not as great as the original, do a pretty fine job. And what I find most impressive is just the sheer amount of content that has been added and is still being added to this game. At the time of this review, there are 3 regions out with I don't know how many more scheduled on the way. And each one of these regions has dozens of hours of gameplay with new quests, characters, and even music. And speaking of music, this soundtrack was another thing that really, really surprised me. When you're thinking of a free-to-play game, especially a game that's playable on mobile, you do not get your expectations up for a soundtrack. But it's a fully original orchestral soundtrack that I was not expecting to be good, and it blew me away. Exploring the mountains in the Liyue region went from fun to incredible, with some gorgeous piano and strings in the background. It really elevated the world for me from, okay, it's a fun little open world, to, wow, I can actually get, invested in this area that I'm exploring. The music, I was very impressed by the music. And this might be the best way of describing Genshin Impact, because I went into this game expecting just a fun little Breath of the Wild ripoff that I'd get a few hours of enjoyment out of. But I got a surprisingly deep experience with story, characters, music, and a whole world to explore. So it was real difficult scoring this game, because yes, it has a ton of great content, but it's not without its flaws. As I mentioned earlier, the ideas are clearly lifted from Breath of the Wild. Many of these mechanics are also not explained well. There is a large amount of grinding involved. Side note for about 10 seconds, there is a ton of grinding involved. To level up your characters, you're going to have to spend quite a few hours just replaying the same stuff. And not to mention the gacha mechanic is basically gambling. But at the end of the day, with all this being said, I have been enjoying Genshin Impact. And I'm going to be giving it an A- because there's just so much quality content here that if you're looking for a game that will take a few months of your time, a game that, you don't want a super moving, deep, it's going to break you down to tears story. You don't want this aggressively dark or gloomy experience. You just want a fun little game. You might be able to play with your friends in some co-op and just turn your brain off and have some fun. Genshin Impact's a great option for that. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. You have been listening to Remap, the gaming podcast. My name is Jared, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.